everyone, it is Matt here from Scoop in Response, and today I'm going to be going over a new deck tech for one of the commanders that was spoilt with C21. That is Yedora Grave Gardener. I spotted this card and straight away I was super keen to start brewing around it. For those of you who have been following the channel, I had an Ashaya list that I just absolutely loved when Ashaya was spoilt. I'll have a link for that in the description of the video. Another treefolk commander. We'll look at the stats first of all. So it's a 4 and a green for a 5/5 legendary treefolk druid. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may return it to the battlefield face down under its owner's control. It's a forest land. It has no other types or abilities. So absolutely crazy weird kind of card. Off the bat, it's a bit tricky to sort of understand what the real power and the directions that you can go with for this commander. I guess as a card in the 99, it makes a lot of sense because you can do lots of weird and wonderful things when you've got access to all 5 colors. But in green only, you're a little bit limited to what you could actually do to really abuse this. And I really love looking at build-arounds where I can. And this is no exception to that, I guess. What we sort of came up with was making it a really heavy creature-based deck with a whole bunch of combos in it that are going to allow us to win the game is kind of the direction that we're going in with this. It's quite similar to Ashaya in the list and whatnot, with a few notable exceptions. The crazy cool thing that we've sort of found through looking at all of the various judge groups and everything like that to try and find the ways to abuse this is really that Morph is the most abusable mechanic with this commander. Now the reason that Morph is able to work, even though the creature says, the commander says it's a forest land, it has no other types or abilities, is that the Morph creature on the battlefield the token doesn't actually have the Morph ability, it's the backside or the front face of the Morph card that has that ability, which means that you can actually use the Morph ability even though it says that it has no other types or abilities. And it all comes down to the layers in which that it affects. I'm not a judge, so I'm not going to try and explain in too much detail, but effectively Yedora's ability affects all of the cards at a particular layer, which is superseded by where Morph is situated in the layers for its abilities. So essentially the Morph can still resolve. So if you have a Morph creature that comes back as a forest land, so if it gets destroyed and you have it come back as a land, you can still activate its Morph ability and return it to the battlefield as its original creature. So that's pretty crazy. The other, I guess, really exciting thing is we've got a lot of ways to abuse this kind of effect where it comes back as a forest, provided it's not a token. So if we have an effect where we can turn our creatures we turn our lands into creatures, then that means we can make infinite loops and win on the spot with engines that allow us to effectively recur those creatures. So I'll run through everything with regards to that. So looking at the creature base first and foremost, we've got Birchlaw Rangers, Morph ability, not super relevant, but just a cool mana dork that we can get back. We've got Elvish Mystic, Finhorn Elves, Llanowar Elves. The 3 of these are just your standard 1-drop dorks. I think they're great. They'll be in most decks of this sort. We've got Kirian Ranger. So Kirian Ranger is a massive combo piece, probably one of the most important cards in the deck if you're wanting to combo off on the spot and win. We'll go over the loops in a bit. We've got Hainok Survivalist. So Morph creature, when it's turned face up, destroy artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. We've got Broodhatch Nantuko. When it's dealt damage, you may create that many 1/1 green insect creature tokens, and it's a Morph creature as well. So Morph for 3, pretty good rate on that. Mega Morph on this one for 2. We've got Den Protector, another morph creature. When it's turned face up, return target card from your graveyard to your hand. So you've got much more recursion once again with all of that. We've got Elvish Visionary. It's just a draw spell for 2. Guardian Shield Bearer, Megamorph. It's just another morph creature. When it's turned face up, put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature you control. I like this just because we need a lot of creatures in this deck, and we want to be able to have flexibility with our the cards that we're going to start recurring. If we only pick the very best morph cards, then essentially we're going to sort of be stuck with a lot of expensive things that also are going to be too few in numbers. With something like this, we can use this quite regularly when we're doing loops and things like that. Hooded Hydra, pretty good morph creature, comes back as a 5/5 with +1/+1 counters, creates tokens when it dies, so you can do all kinds of cool things with that. Lotus Cobra, with the amount of lands that we have entering the battlefield, which would be your forests as they come into play, you can essentially generate a whole bunch of mana off of every time a creature is destroyed, so awesome include in this list. Priest of Titania, not super critical. We've got quite a few elves in this list. Essentially, it's just a way to ramp harder, get your commander out as quickly as possible. Scrib Ranger plays a very, very similar role to Kirian Ranger in this list. Worth mentioning, both of these cards say that we get to return a forest to our hand, which could be any of our creatures that were turned into forests. So we lose our Avenger of Zendikar, or we lose our Kogla, it comes back as a forest. We can use these cards to then get that forest Kogla back into our hand, and then sort of repeat those value cycles again. So definitely one of the most important cards in the list. Tribal Force Mage, another morph creature, turns face up, creatures of the type of your choice get +2/+2 and gain trample until end of turn. Very cool card. You can do sort of some weird and wonderful loops with this to sort of go infinitely large, which we'll go into later on, but very cool card. It's a bit of a win con, but also just a good mid-range threat to sort of pressure, which I really like. The other thing worth mentioning as well is that because morph creatures don't use the stack, you can use them as very, very specific combat tricks. So they kind of trump everything else. They trump instant, they trump split second. You can activate these at any time because they're special actions. Branch Snaplorian, this is another one of your pretty average morph creatures, but what I really liked about this is that it's a morph for 1. So as it comes back, you only have to pay 1 green to get that 4/1 trampler for you. So if you wanted to lean into more combat, this is a great recursive threat for you. Deathmist Raptor. So this is a really good utility morph creature. Whenever a opponent you control is turned face up, you may return Deathmist Raptor from your graveyard to the battlefield, face up or face down. So just a fantastic way to keep bringing that creature back. Just absolutely awesome. Ewit, staple in any sort of green list that you're playing these days. Doesn't really need much explaining. It helps you get back your combo pieces, lets you do a whole bunch of cool things. Old Growth Troll. So this is a bit of a weird one. It's a new card from Kaldheim for 3. It's a 4/4 with trample. When Old Growth Troll dies, if it was a creature, return it to the battlefield. It's an aura enchantment with enchant forest you control, and enchanted forest has add 2 green, and 1 tap. Sacrifice this land, create a tapped 4/4 green troll warrior creature token with trample. Wow, that's a mouthful. So essentially, this creature dies. You can have it come back as a forest land, or you can have it come back as an enchantment on a forest land. And then you can use that again to sacrifice it, create a token version of itself, which that will then come back. The sacrifice land will then come back, provided it's a creature, as a forest land again. So you can kind of do all these weird value loops. This isn't really like an infinite loop. There may be some ways that you can kind of go infinite and create a bit of value that way, but this is mostly just a value-centric loop that you can use in the deck. We've got Ramanap Excavator, play land cards from your graveyard. We've got a little bit of, I guess, stacksy sort of things going on with your strip mine and wasteland, and every now and again you're going to want to have those kind of loops where you can just sort of strip mine someone each turn. There's going to be a lot of times where we can treat our strip mine and our wasteland just as a free spell that we can cast once a turn, because we're going to have heaps of mana, regardless. We've got Reclamation Sage, which is obviously awesome card. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. I think these cards are sort of pretty fantastic in any green deck. We do have a few other ways to destroy artifacts and enchantments, so I wouldn't say this is an absolute gimme. I've just included it because it makes sense to round out your curve, it makes sense to round out your creature package and giving you redundant choices. The other thing as well is, I find if I don't have a list of all of my creatures out, on my side in sort of play where I can look at it when I'm going to tutor for something with Green Suns, sometimes I can forget that I've got more, niche tools, and I know that Green Sun Zenith can always go and get me a Rex Age or an Eternal Witness, and that's sort of just burned into my head from playing with it in multiple formats. Beast Whisperer, great card draw spell, staple at this point. Elf as well, so it helps pump your Priest of Titania. Nantucket Vigilante, it is a destroy target artifact or enchantment morph again. So we've got one and we've got two. Where's the other one? The Survivalist. So we've got two creatures that can destroy enchantments and artifacts that are morph spells. So yeah, the Rex Sage being the third, I wouldn't say it's completely necessary. Questing Beast, just a good value stick, just awesome card in general. Serpentine Basilisk, another morph creature. Whenever it deals combat damage to a creature, destroy that creature at end of combat. So kind of like a pseudo Death Touch. Temur Sabertooth, you're going to be using this to return all of your creature lands back to hand if you can turn them into lands, or you can use it to just create a whole bunch of value loops with Old Growth Troll. You can do it with Hooded Hydra. There's just so many targets for this that you're going to just find will come out in the course of a game. Thelonite Hermit, another morph spell, creates a whole bunch of tokens which we can then sack. We don't get the tokens back obviously, but we can sack them to mill or to gain mana. And Saprolings, it's also a Lord for Saprolings, so there's a little bit of Saproling synergy in this deck, but not a whole bunch. Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, insane card. It goes infinite with Kirian Ranger, infinite landfall, and that can quickly turn into infinite mana, everything like that. You'll use this to just basically win faster than sort of any other creature in the deck. It's just so compact. It's a beta in itself, so once it's nice and big, because all of your creatures and all of your lands are going to be forests, you can just be swinging for 20 a turn, and there's plenty of ways to give it trample. Elder Gargaroth, similar to Questing Beast, just another big value creature, absolutely solid card. Hysterodon, another morph creature. You get to draw a card when it deals combat damage, and it's got trample, so it's a good mid-range beater. Primal Whisperer, this gets +2/+2 for each face down creature in play, so absolutely huge in this deck. Timber Protector, other treefolk and forests you control are indestructible. Other treefolk creatures you control get +1/+1. So giving all of our forests indestructible when they're already lands is pretty damn busted. And other treefolk having +1/+1 and other, it's just absolutely awesome in this list. This sort of becomes your sort of second commander in a way, maybe even third if you consider a Shire as well. So once you have Temper Protector and Yedora out on the field, you probably want to have the protection for Lightning Greaves on Timber Protector rather than Yedora, because then you've only got a dodge path and swords really. There's not a lot of other removal that's going to be able to deal with Yedora if it's indestructible. Got Kamal. We've actually got both Kamals in this list. I just think that they're cool. You can turn someone's land into a creature until end of turn. You can create you can have your creatures be pumped. You get the +3/+3 and trample till end of turn. So great if you've got these big beaters like Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, or you've managed to pump everything up quite a bit with Tribal Force Mage, so great card. Kogla, another way of bouncing Ewit, but also just a really good solid enchantment destroyer. Yeah, so you make lots of loops with it. It's a beater in itself. Yeah, cool card in most green lists. It's kind of like a backup Team of Sabertooth if you don't have that, or if it's been destroyed. You can basically bounce your Ewit again. Root Elemental, another pretty average morph creature. It's 7 to morph it, so it's very expensive, but when it's turned face up, you can put a creature card from your hand into play. I guess the only real reason that you'd want to do this is if you're worried that something's going to get countered and you think you can win if it doesn't, so you might want to put your Ashaya or your Timber Protector onto the battlefield with it, or of course something like your other big drops like your Kamals or something like that. So we've got I can't even remember what yeah, Vertaloth the Ancient, the 4 and 2/2 for a 4/7 kicker X. All other treefolk and saprolings get +1/+1. When it comes into play, if the kicker was paid, you get more saproling creature tokens. This is just a Lord and I guess just, you know, a pump spell more than anything. You've just got the Lord, you've got those tokens that you can use as well for, you know, just going for the win. Just a big value piece. Avenger of Zendikar, exactly the same thing. You're going to have a lot of lands, so you're going to make a lot of creatures, a lot of plant tokens, and you're going to be able to do a lot of things that make those tokens absolutely monstrous. Kamal, Heart of Krosa, another Kamal, obviously. This is the newer one. At the beginning of combat, you get +3/+3 and trample until end of turn, and then target lands can become elemental creatures with vigilance, indestructible, haste. They're still lands. Yeah, just great card in this list. So that is the creatures. Onto sorceries and instants. Very light with this. Glimpse of Nature, Green Sun Zenith. Draw a whole bunch of cards, tutor for a particular card. Crop rotation. We've got a few key lands in this list that are really fantastic once they're out on the battlefield. Heroic Intervention, just for protection. Beast Within for removal. Return to the Wild Speaker. Most of the time it's just more card draw. You're probably not doing it for anything else, so it's usually just going to be like a 5 mana draw 4, 5, or 6. But you know, it'll be 3 at a pinch too, because most of your creatures are going to be 3 at the lowest. Artifacts, very standard ramp package: Jeweled Lotus, Mana Crypt, Sol Ring, Arcane Signet, and then we've got Altar of Dementia, Ashnod's Altar, and Phyrexian Altar. These are your win cons / infinite mana outlets, just great cards. I'll go over the loops once we look through the list, but essentially these are a combination of your win con, but also just, you know, getting infinite mana. Staff of Domination, bit of redundancy where we don't have a way of finding our win on the spot. You're really just using this for a draw card if we have infinite mana, but you can also gain infinite life as well, so it can sort of save you there too. Lastly, we've got Nev's Disc, which is kind of just a weird catch-all. If all of our creatures are indestructible, we can nuke it and it's a one-way board wipe, or sometimes we want to turn all of our creatures into lands and ramp that way. That's cool as well, and then continue to create value as well. So sort of lots of weird things that you can do with this when your lands are creatures and your creatures are land, etc, etc. Enchantments wise, we've got Carpet of Flowers, Utopia Sprawl, Wild Growth. These are just more ramp spells. Cryptolith Rite and Earthcraft. So both of these are just for getting more out of creatures that you might not be attacking with. So whether they're tokens or whether they are just creatures that you don't want to attack with because you don't have a strong attack with them. So you can use them to get mana. Earthcraft's also used to go infinite with Squirrel's Nest. Essentially, you can just continuously tap and untap squirrels and a land to create infinite squirrel tokens. So very cool combo there. Kenrith's Transformation, it's removal and a cantrip, so just a great card. Sylvan Library, staple. Trail of Mystery. So whenever a face-down creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may search your library for a basic land, reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Whenever a permanent you control is turned face up, it's a creature, get +2/+2 until end of turn. So this this doesn't do a lot on its own, but because it's so cheap, I think it's just a good include for the list. So this will draw you a card if you happen to have a Life of Limb or a Living Lands out for every single creature that enters the battlefield as a land, essentially. So a face down creature would be your land that is a forest, that is a creature as it enters, so you need those other effects. So that means that you get a board wipe, you lose 4 or 5 creatures, you draw 5 cards from that, which is solid. Growing Rights, look at the top 4 cards, pick a creature. You've got 38 hits, so you're going to hit, overwhelmingly you will have a answer that is sort of presented to you with Growing Rights, and then it flips to become a Guy's Cradle, so solid card. Squirrel's Nest we've gone over. Guardian Project, more card draw, much like Beast Whisperer, just a great card. And then lastly, we've got Living Lands and Life and Limb. All forests and all saplings are 1/1 green sapling creatures and forest lands in addition to their other types. Same thing can be said for Living Lands, so they're just ways to turn our creatures into lands. Our lands into creatures. For our actual land package, we have Dryad Arbor, we have Field of the Dead, Cradle, Guildless Commons, Jungle Basin, Misty Rainforest, Zoetic Cavern, Wooded Foothills, Windswept Heath, Wasteland, Verdant Catacombs, Strip Mine, and Prismatic Vista. So it's fetch lands, bounce lands, strip mine, wasteland, a whole bunch of basic forests, and Dryad Arbor, Field of the Dead, and Cradle. So Cradle, we've got huge amounts of creatures, so just absolutely great card. Field of the Dead works really interestingly with a Shire. So I wouldn't worry about this trying to turn this on at any given point unless you have a Shire, because as you can see, if we forget about the fetch lands, we've got 1, 2, 3. We can't even really consider the wasteland and the strip mine anyway. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 named lands total. So, not really likely that we're actually going to get to use the Field of the Dead effect unless we have the Ashaya out. Because Ashaya says that all of our non-token creatures are forest lands into their as well as their other types. So that means that all of our creatures are Llanowar Elves, the land, Hooded Hydra, the land, so they all have different names, and so they will all trigger our Field of the Dead, which is absolutely solid. The bounce lands are included because, once again, sometimes we have a creature that we don't want to become a forest land and we need another way of getting it back. So we play a bounce land and we return that land to our hand so that we can then cast it for value. Just awesome card overall. You can also do that kind of thing with like crop rotation as well, which is pretty cool because, this isn't strictly a sacrifice when you've got your Grave Gardener out, or you've got your Living Lands and Life from Limb. So that's, I guess, the list overall. The loops that we can do with this really revolve around having Altar of Dementia or Ashnod's Altar or Phyrexian Altar out, as well as Life and Limb or Living Lands with our commander, of course. So what this means is we look at any of our basic forests in our deck, or any other land or any creature. We sacrifice a creature, which could be any of our basic forests or any of our creatures or anything like that. It could be any of our fetch lands even. So we sacrifice that creature dies. Our commander sees the creature die, and then it returns that non-token creature, because even though it might be a basic forest or something like that, it's not a token. It's still a creature, but it's not a token. It then goes to the graveyard and then comes back as a basic forest again. And then we can then sacrifice that same creature. That loop repeats, and it will then come back to the battlefield again. So that basic forest, we sacrifice it a whole bunch of times. With Altar of Dementia, we can just mill all of our opponents, which obviously wins us the game in their next upkeeps. But obviously, if they have a Shuffle Titan or something like that, we're not actually going to be able to win with just milling alone. So it may be a case where we've got to use Altar of Dementia. We kill 2 of our opponents, and then there's 1 left. But because they have a Guy's Anthem or a Shuffle Titan or a Blightsteel or something like that, we can't just outright kill them on the spot. So that's why we have things like our Ashnod's Altar, which we can use to generate stupid amounts of mana. We have our Phyrexian Altar, which we can also use to generate stupid amounts of mana. And we have our Staff of Domination to draw our deck to find other things that will allow us to win the next turn or something like that. So cool things that we could do with Kirian Ranger and Ashaya Soul of the Wild. Kirian Ranger says, return a forest you control to its owner's hand, untap target creature, use this ability once a turn. So you can use Kirian Ranger to return itself to its hand, and then you play it again for a landfall effect. And then because this also lets you in the ability untap target creature, if you have Ashaya out on the battlefield, you can tap the Ashaya, then use the Kirian Ranger to return it to its hand, to return it to your hand. And then that will then untap the Ashaya, which you can then tap for green to play the Kirian Ranger again. So you get infinite mana that way. That's, sorry, not infinite mana, infinite landfalls. So that combined with the Lotus Cobra, or that combined with a numerous sort of other effect like a Avenger of Zendikar or a Field of the Dead or anything that is going to generate you value each time you do that, you know, that's essentially is the point. If you have a Glimpse of Nature, you get to draw a card every time you do that. If you have, excuse me, something like Cryptolitherite or Earthcraft, you can actually, well, sorry, it's mostly Earthcraft with this. You can use Earthcraft to then tap the Kirian Ranger before you return it to a hand, return it to your hand, and then generate infinite mana off of that, because essentially you're generating 2 mana for each of those loops rather than just the 1 mana, so you have 1 mana up every time you do it. Same thing with Scrib Ranger. If you have the Earthcraft out, you can return a forest, which would be the Scrib Ranger, untap target creature, which will be the Ashaya, and then with the Earthcraft out, you're not paying 1 mana each time, you're actually breaking even, so you can get those infinite triggers each time. This works really handy because once you've got infinite mana, you know, you can go and do things like find your Sabertooth. You can use your Sabertooth to bounce your Elvish Visionary and then replay your Elvish Visionary and bounce it again with the Sabertooth to generate mana that way. If you've got a sack outlet that generates you mana, you can play something like your, your Hooded Hydra. So you play the Hooded Hydra, it enters the battlefield with X+1 counters. Let's say you do 3, so you've paid 5 mana. It's got 3+1 counters on it. You then sacrifice it and you create 3 1/1 tokens. That gives you another 3 mana, so you've got 4 mana from sacrificing that and the 3 tokens. The Hooded Hydra comes back as a forest land. That might be a creature as well. There's your 5th, and you can just do that loop there, or you can then remorph it again if you've got something like a Cryptolitherite or an Earthcraft out, where you can actually tap them before you do all of those things. So they're all a bit convoluted, but the strength of this actual package together isn't that one particular card, even though Ashaya and Kirian Ranger are obviously the most compact and tightest way of doing this. There are so many ways that you can generate infinite value, either infinite landfall or infinite triggers, to sort of do this and win the game that way. So it's going to be, you know, just piloting and looking at everything to try and work out what the best choice is at that given time. Now that said, you could just opt to put something like Rampaging Baloths in this list. I wouldn't fault you at all for that. I've chosen not to, mostly because I keep getting, I guess, situations where I have Rampaging Baloths in my hand and I just don't get to get value out of it, but that's, I guess, probably because I'm playing at a particularly fast meta and I'm trying to play mono green decks at CEDH or borderline CEDH tables. So yeah, that's pretty much the video. Thanks so much for checking out the list. I'd encourage anyone to leave any comments or feedback or things that they think I've missed in the list. Of course, you can actually budget this super easily by chucking the Cradle, the Jeweled Lotus, and the Mana Crypt out of the deck. They're not, you know, absolute gimmies, you know, by any means. It'll reduce the cost by, you know, over half price. You'll probably be paying like $800 to build out this complete list rather than $2,000. But yeah, thanks again for watching the video, and I shall see you guys next time.